So, welcome to our March 30th Dharma class, virtual Dharma class, Dharma in the age of the pandemic. As I said, I've got a few topics I wanted to share a little bit about this evening, but I also welcome if you have any questions about meditation, about Dharma, about coping with any aspect of what's happening that you may be finding interesting, intriguing, difficult, challenging. You can ask the question in the chat box if you like, and I will do my best to get to them. What I wanted to share off the top this evening is an old and familiar and fantastic teaching of the Four Brahmaviharas. I thought now more than perhaps ever, it might be good for all of us to have a reminder of the four positive, wholesome qualities of mind. And the term Brahmaviharas translates to noble or divine abodes. Brahma as in a Brahman, the noble person, the divine person, and a Vihara means house or home or abode. So these four divine abodes, these four beautiful houses, so to speak, are places that we would like to inhabit. If you could take your mind and put it into a house, and this house was named the jealousy, insecurity house, and this house was named the hostility, mistrustful house, and so on and so on. And this one was the gluttony, greedy, eating too much birthday cake house. I've been living in that one for 24 hours, and so on and so on. And then there was a house which was the peaceful serenity house, and one that was the warm, cheerful, good humor house, and so on. Who amongst us would choose a hostility house or a jealousy house or a misery house or an insecurity house? Well, none of us would. We're not fools and we're not masochists. We would, of course, want to gravitate towards the divine abodes. We'd want to gravitate towards the wholesome houses, the states of mind, the rooms which we would like to hang out in. We would like to place our mind into a peaceful abode. We would like to place our mind into a generous abode. We would like to place our mind into a humorous abode. In fact, I'm going to ask you to engage a little bit. Why not? We've got this interesting online teaching opportunity. I want you, some of you, as many who wish to type in the chat box a quality of emotion or a quality of mind you would like to hang out in. What's a positive mind state, because none of you are masochists, that you would like to have more of, or spend more time having the mind rest in that divine abode. Again, I've given you some examples, but just put in there, what is a positive mental emotional state or a positive emotion you would like to experience on tap whenever you wish? We've got contentment, we've got joy. Good. What else? Serenity, self-compassion, focus. Very nice. Contentment and gratitude, self-love, equanimity, confidence. Hallelujah for that. Loved, peace, humor. Excellent. Let's put them all together. Equanimity again, peace again. Right. Of course we would, because we long for peace. We long to feel good. The human organism and all other organisms, including virus, sentient beings, simply wish to be happy. Whether they can consciously think of what that is, but they move towards contentment and they move away from pain or discomfort. Joy, compassion, spacious clarity, relaxed, safety, and trust. These are beautiful states of mind. Now, the Buddha taught the four divine abodes. So we'll say the ultimate four wholesome qualities of mind that we should aspire to obtain, but that's a bit graspy and a bit efforting, although effort has a point and purpose. But the Buddha also taught that these four divine abodes, yes, I'm going to talk about them in a moment if they're unfamiliar to some of you watching. Not only are these things to aspire to and to cultivate with some deliberateness, to train the mind, to place the mind in these states, to cultivate circumstances, people, Dharma classes, beautiful flowers, walks in the wood that help invite the mind to be in these divine abodes, these four noble emotions, I'll also call them tonight. So we can seek to cultivate these, but also beautifully through the practice of Buddha Dharma, through the practice of meditation, even through the practice of secular mindfulness, these 4 positive divine emotions, states of mind, mind qualities, divine abodes are also an outcome of the practice. So much like taking yourself to the gym on a regular basis under good tutelage and working your body in a wise way, the outcome of that practice is a sense of stamina, a sense of fitness, a sense of vitality some of the time. So these are both things we can place the mind in these states. We can cultivate these states like planting seeds, watering them, and tending them. And as we simply practice being a good human, training our mind, opening our hearts, the resultant of those actions is also the mind's tendency to move towards these 4 noble mind states. Okay, for those of you dying to know who aren't familiar with these 4, they are loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. Now, the Buddha taught for the most part, what I'm about to say is accurate, that when the mind is completely free of the poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, when the mind has seen the truth of reality, the 4 noble truths, when the heart has been liberated, the heart mind, the chitta I spoke about last time, has been liberated, effectively all that's left in terms of qualities of mind and qualities of heart are these 4 noble abodes. So another way to put that is, once you become a fully awake being, once you attain Buddhahood, these are the only states your mind will ever inhabit. There will be no traces left of selfishness, of greed, of taking care of number 1, of hoarding food, supplies, toilet paper, because we're frightened there might not be enough. All traces of that will be gone from the mind stream when we achieve full awakening. Not there yet. Fervent wish for all of us to get there, and very, very speedily. No traces of aversion, dislike, judgment of self or others, hatred, anger, repulsion, pushing away, completely eradicated from the mind. Imagine that. Imagine the most beautiful states of mind you've ever experienced, perhaps in meditation, perhaps in lovemaking, perhaps holding your infant or your grandchild in your arms, the heart glowing with non-judgmental love. Imagine those most peak, beautiful moments of heart and mind you've ever experienced in your life. And imagine gathering them all together, melting them in a pot of gold to the most sublime mind states. These are the 4 Brahmaviharas. So let's take a bit of a deeper dive into them, particularly in the context of us being in a challenging and, in our lifetimes, for most of us, unique period in history around the extraordinary measures we're taking as individuals, as families, as communities, as countries, and as a global nation to actually pull together in interconnected isolation. How's that? How's that for a mind-blowing concept? Unheard of in our lifetime. We are staying at home. We are isolating from each other. We are, as a group of humanity, for the most part, choosing to do the right thing, choosing to do the wise thing, sometimes the difficult thing, for the betterment of all beings, for the benefit of our elders, for the benefit of our neighbors. We are pulling together in ultimately the biggest act of wisdom and compassion we've ever seen. How's that for a positive take on how we're rising to the challenges of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19? Not each and every one of us with selfishness. We're not barricaded in our homes with a shotgun, fearful and rage-filled that our neighbor will come take our stuff. Yes, we can all have flashes of that tendency, most certainly. Yes, each and every one of us on this call has had flashes of selfishness and fear and confusion. And what if there's not enough for me, for my loved ones? Yes, these are the root poisons. We're not free of them yet. But as a nation and as a global group, for the most part, we are doing the right things. There are so many beautiful examples of the interconnected, the appreciation, the compassion. We were looking to place an online grocery order at one of our local grocery stores here on Vancouver Island. And I was visiting the website, and there was a letter from, I guess, the general manager or the owner of the corporation, thanking people for the sorts of messages they were sharing with the grocery workers. And they listed all sorts of them. They said, thank you to the 12-year-old boy who wrote a handmade card decorated with handmade drawings, thanking each and every one of the grocery workers and saying they were his true heroes. Thank you to the people who've written on chalk on the the pavement walkway outside of the grocery store. Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for risking your own well-being so that we can have supplies and food and safety. And on and on and on. It was this long list of thank you to the person, the elderly woman who brought in donuts to share with the staff at the grocery store. Thank you to the local restaurant that donated lunch for our workers who were stocking the shelves after hours, and on and on. Moments of compassion, one of the four divine abodes, one of the four Brahmaviharas. So from the more classical teaching, let's go through these each a little bit one by one as a reminder of the true nature of our mind. Because you see, under the clouds of confusion, selfishness, and fear, this is the radiant sun of awakening. This is, believe it or not, the nature of your mind. The nature of mind, not your mind, not my mind, but we'll use that shorthand sometimes as well, is radiant, unobstructed, clean, clear, luminous compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, and empathetic joy. And that's it, folks. That's all she wrote. That is the nature of mind. When our mind constricts, when it is tangled by the root poisons, the greed, the selfishness, the anger and aversion and judgment, and the ignorance, the delusion, the bewilderment, the mistrust, the lack of realizing the truth of reality, that's when we obscure, not necessarily on purpose, but the nature of mind is obscured by the poisons, by the clouds over the sun. You've heard me teach this many, many times. Otherwise, teachers, I hope, have taught this to you many other times. The good news is, under those clouds, the sun is always shining. So let's break down these four Brahmaviharas a little bit. A very timely reminder. The first one, metta, or loving kindness, metta being the Pali word. I also really enjoy the translation of metta to loving kindness, but also as translated to loving friendliness. This sense of a warm, friendly, sweet, uncomplicated affection that when the mind is really dwelling in that divine abode, that warm, loving friendliness and affection is felt not just for your nearest and dearest, how important is that right now, but for strangers, for others, for the hero on the front line of the grocery store. That's loving kindness. Those messages of hope, those messages of gratitude are loving friendliness, loving kindness. When that divine abode is well established, or metta, we feel it not just for our spouse, our grandmother, our grandchild, our friend, our neighbor, our dog, our cat, our lover, our beloved, our spouse. We feel it for all beings, for strangers. And you've experienced this. You've all experienced this, even if you think you haven't. You've been in a really lovely state of mind and heart. Maybe things are going really well in your life. Things are happy. You're feeling content. All those beautiful words you've shared, relaxed, safety, trust, peace, equanimity, joy, compassion, spacious clarity, all these beautiful qualities of mind. You're in just, if I might say so, a darn good state. You're in a darn good mood, we might say, in Western psychology. And you're walking along a street and you just kind of like everybody. You just feel happiness toward them. You see someone chatting and laughing with their friend and it sort of warms your heart. You see someone tossing a ball for their dog and it just charms you, whether or not you're a dog person. You see someone maybe struggling a little bit on the other side of the road, a little bit crabby, a little bit of disagreement in a family cluster. And instead of feeling judgmental or superior or anything negative, you feel sort of this sweetness like, oh yeah, I've been there. I hope you forgive each other and move on. That's hanging out temporarily in the divine abode of metta, loving friendliness, loving kindness. To feel that, we all know, you're resonating with it, I hope, as you hear a reminder of the description, that when we are resting in the state of loving friendliness, it feels very good. There's a spaciousness to the heart. Maybe that's why we worked with breathing in and out of the heart. What do you know? Method to the madness sometimes, right? Interconnectedness of the practice and the Dharma. When we're hanging out in the uncomplicated state of loving kindness, loving friendliness, it feels good. Because it's pure. because it's unencumbered, it's unobstructed, it's not made small by self-interest, it's not made small by fear, it's not made small by the walls of me against you. So this is loving friendliness, metta, one of the 4 noble mind states, or if we want to put it in Western psychological vernacular, the 4 emotional states, states of minds, moods, or mental qualities to develop, and that are the natural outcome of training the mind and opening the heart. Metta, loving friendliness. Now, the key I want to reiterate isn't simply to feel this toward the objects of our own personal affection, our own dogs, cats, friends, etc. That's a wonderful place to start. And boy, that's a challenging place to start too. We all know that our heart can tighten with our objects of affection. We can feel judgmental, hurt by, injured by, annoyed at, grumpy toward our nearest and dearest. This is why practicing in the home, practicing with your beloved, practicing with your family, practicing with your friends is such a brilliant, deep, profound way to practice. Why I combine the teachings of Buddha Dharma at times with couples work. Because in our coupledom with our spouse, with our beloved, is where sometimes it can be very difficult to feel warm, friendly, loving kindness. We can feel a lot of attached, clingy, controlling sort of love toward our spouse, but to have that open palmed, I love you as is, with a sweet, open, like breath breezing through the room, instead of I love you and I need you and you must do what I must say. So metta, loving friendliness, loving kindness, the first of the 4 Brahmaviharas, divine abodes, beautiful, rarefied mental emotional states. The second, compassion, karuna, K-A-R-U-N-A, from the Pali, karuna, compassion, a word that essentially translates in English and is defined in the same way as in the Pali or the Tibetan or other approaches. Compassion, to be moved by the suffering of another or ourselves, and to be moved to alleviate or eliminate that suffering. That would be a reasonable description of some of the healthcare workers, first responders, police, paramedics, firefighters, who are in our current climate with the COVID-19 pandemic, moved by the suffering of others to even step beyond their own personal safety at times while taking appropriate self-compassionate and wise precautions, but willing to step out to help those that are suffering, to try to alleviate their suffering. There's a small, beautiful moment of bodhisattva work, is to step beyond our fear or our own self-interest or our own concern to help others. Now, the Tibetans have a beautiful term that roughly translates as idiot compassion, and idiot compassion is not a good idea. So throwing yourself in the path of a runaway freight train to impress a crowd is idiot compassion. It's not even compassion at all, it's just idiocy, actually. But idiot compassion means don't be wildly foolish. Be wise in your compassionate action. Have compassion for self and for other. So I think all of us are moved by stories locally and around the world, but the first one that came to my attention was in North Vancouver. I've since heard it's happening here in the Cowichan Valley, in Victoria and elsewhere. But in North Vancouver at 7 p.m., you may have seen it on TV or on Facebook. There's groups of large apartment buildings around where the Lionsgate Hospital is. And at 7 p.m., the shift change comes. So the new nurses, orderlies, et cetera, come in, and those that are finished their shift leave. And at 7 p.m., so many people are going out on their balconies and cheering and whooping and hollering and banging pots and pans out of compassionate gratitude for the healthcare workers who are out there putting human suffering first and attempting to alleviate human suffering. And we as a populace are moved by that. And this is what's unprecedented. When's the last time anybody went out onto their balcony in North Vancouver to cheer on a nurse or a doctor or an orderly or a healthcare worker or a cleaner working in the hospital? We can get terribly self-centered in our busy, blinded lives and forget to witness the everyday beauty, the everyday act of compassion around us all the time, including our own everyday acts of compassion that we're not doing for pots and pans or applause. We're doing it because it's the right and noble thing to do, because we're in the divine abode of compassion. It comes naturally, whether it's with your child, your friend, someone struggling on the street, you see someone with a flat tire and you've got a jack and the ability to wield it, you pull over, you say, how can I help? The amount of moments of regular human compassion each of you feel and execute every day is very heartening. And that's why there's hope for humanity. And what we're seeing, I think to the great surprise of a lot of people, certain world leaders don't show this quality, other world leaders do. The quality of compassion for those less fortunate, the quality of compassion for those other than us, the quality of compassion for those that are struggling, which is to say, I see your suffering and I'm moved as much as I'm able to alleviate it. Karuna, compassion for self. And I encourage you to cultivate and honor self-compassion, particularly now when you may be frightened, you may be alone, you may be feeling the black dog of depression biting at your heels, particularly if it's something you struggle with. I was on a call with a major business leader. She made $10 million last year in her online business. She's a leader. She's a beautiful human being, a tremendous teacher. And she shared with her group, her high-powered business group online, that she has struggled off and on with depression all her life, and she's feeling it beckoning during this difficult time. And I wrote in the chat box, much like the one you've got access to right now, I said, thank you so much for saying publicly that you have struggled with depression, because she's such a leader and such a dynamo, and she seems absolutely all together all the time with this warm heart of service and kindness and authenticity. For her to say, yes, I struggle with depression, I have off and on in my life, and I can feel it nipping at my heels, and I'm not going to let it in. Of course, during a time of isolation, fear for those we love, fear for strangers, the sad, difficult events unfolding in Spain and Italy and China previous to that, in Iran and elsewhere, and of course in Canada and the US, really can pull on our compassion, really can pull on our heart, and it can really beckon us into the depths of depression or despair. Because what's called the near enemy of compassion in the traditional Buddhist teaching, the near enemy of compassion is despair. Compassion is being moved by the suffering of the world and being moved to do something, if possible, to alleviate it. Despair is to drown in the suffering of the world, to see the overwhelming nature of the suffering and to feel tiny and powerless against the amount of suffering in the world. It's a very thin line. And one of the ways to help cultivate the mind toward the beautiful karuna, the compassion, divine abode, Brahmavihara, is to remember that it's not up to you alone, that we are an interconnected global species of humans practicing kindness in our own small and large ways. It's not just up to you. Your drop goes in the bucket with my drop, with everybody else's drop on this call. We've got almost 40 people on this call at the moment. That's a lot of drops in a bucket. None of us, thankfully, have to do it alone. Our shoulders aren't quite that big enough yet. We're not full Buddhas yet. However, many of us have taken the Bodhisattva vow, and whether or not we've formally taken it, each and every one of you on this call has a heart of compassion. That doesn't mean we don't fall into selfishness and self-protection. I do too sometimes. But ultimately, the compassion is our nature under the clouds. So, equanimity, mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. Oh, you're asking each other what equanimity is. And Pete gave a lovely answer. Yes, I'm going to get to equanimity, fourth of the Brahmaviharas. Excellent answer there, Pete. Well done. All right. So compassion, karuna. Watch out for the tendency of despair to beckon right now. Watch out for pre-existing, or maybe for the first time, senses of depression, bleakness, overwhelm, sluggishness, sadness, and fatigue to keep you stagnant. One of the most important things you can do, as simple as it sounds, I've spoken to a surprising number of people this week who are not doing this. Go out for a walk. The majority of you, I think, are from Vancouver Island or Vancouver. Some of you are from elsewhere. Welcome, welcome. We're blessed where we live that we can go out walking and not see anyone, pretty much. It's easy enough to cross to the other side of the road because of not social distancing, physical distancing. I'm looking out in the window right now and I see a mountain with nothing on it but a whole load of trees. And when I took my dogs up that same mountain yesterday, we didn't see a soul that didn't have 4 legs. So we were able to go out for a walk. Get out for a walk, get out of your house, get out of your head, get out of this sense of isolation and connect with the vastness of nature, the vastness of the globe, and the vastness of the calm, cool, beautiful feet on the ground feeling, to remind you it's not entirely up to you. There's a giant global populace of beings, of sentient beings. And each and every one of us in our own small, medium, and large ways can practice compassion for self and for other. And together we can fill the bucket. Compassion, karuna. Okay. The third Brahmavihara is translated variously as sympathetic joy or empathetic joy. The Pali word is mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A. And this is the quality of non-self-referential happiness for others. What does self-referential mean? Well, it simply means that I think about myself a lot, and we all do, because we're not fully awake Buddhas yet. When we think of ourself, we get this little twinge of tightness, this little twinge of selfishness, this little twinge of what about me? Mudita, or empathetic joy, or sympathetic joy, speaks. It's a bit of a slippery one, actually. It's a little tricky to describe, but let's say something wonderful befalls a friend of yours. Let's say you and this friend have both been single and been through some pretty rotten knockabout relationships where you got your hearts broken and you weren't treated particularly well, and the person maybe didn't turn out to be as marvelous as you thought you were, or they betrayed you in some way, or they dumped you unceremoniously. You've kind of been woeful brothers or woeful sisters together in your tales of romantic doom and gloom. And you're having a particularly rough go of a couple of broken relationships, a couple of dashed hopes, and you're feeling a bit blue, a bit sad, a bit hopeless about the idea of meeting a compatible and lovely partner to share your life with. And then your friend, who's been a woe sister or a woe brother with you, finds a marvelous seeming partner and falls in love, and the partner falls in love with them, and everything's going really, really swimmingly well for them. You'll likely, if you're a non-awake human being, you're not a full Buddha yet, have a mixture of feelings when your friend tells you, I've met this extraordinary person, I'm so happy, we're having these marvelous dates, they describe them to you, and they've asked me to move in with them. I think this is it. I think this is my future. Because you're a lovely being, you'll feel happy for your friend. But also in there, there'll often be a bit of a heart clench of, but what about me? And you may be noble enough not to share that heart clench with your friend and simply share with him or her your happiness for them and how much you look forward to meeting their new beloved, and can they come over when you can meet in person for a cup of tea, and you really are thrilled for them. And that's all true. But also there's a heart clench of what about me? There's a heart clench of, I wish I could have that too. This is sort of the opposite. That's not quite correct, but we'll let it lie for now. The opposite of empathetic joy is self-referencing, where we find it difficult to just be wholly open in our heart for the good that befalls someone else. To just be, I'm so pleased that these good things are coming to you. I'm so pleased you got the scholarship. I'm so pleased you found the perfect apartment. I'm so pleased you got the promotion. Even if I would have liked the promotion too, I'm just unadulterated, unobstructedly happy for you. So it's a quality of not having that automatic kickback of what about me? I would have liked that too. We all know that that is a heart clench, that it makes us feel a bit small, a bit sad, a bit lonely, a bit pitiful. Actually, it's a very painful way to feel. Please don't beat yourself up. Please don't beat yourself up for being human. And at times we all feel this way. But it's a beautiful thing to cultivate, this kind of expansive happiness for others. Expansive happiness that goodness befalls others. Yes, I can, Monique. I'm going to speak to that at the end. Thank you for that question. Okay, so the third Brahmavihara, we've just reviewed, is the sense of empathetic joy or happiness for the good that befalls others. The fourth of the Brahmaviharas is equanimity or upekkha. Equanimity is a bit of a slippery idea as well. Pete has spoken to it there, and I'll speak to it and expand on his lovely answer there. One of the nicest, easiest ways for a lot of us in the West to think of equanimity is the serenity prayer. God, grant me the strength to change the things I can, the courage to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. This idea that as a compassionate, wise being in the world, we want to take action from a compassionate place, not from anger, not from rejection, not from conquering, but from compassion, wisdom, and kindness. Absolutely change the things we can. Absolutely take food to the food bank. Absolutely deliver food to your neighbors if that's a wise and safe thing to do right now. I have a dear friend who's got a really rotten cancer and has been quite sick off and on for a decade now. And a group of us were gathering on Zoom to have a girlfriend call. These are all women who went to school together, through high school together. And our friend said, oh, I can't join you at that time because I'm delivering food to needy elderly shut-ins. Our friend with cancer, who arguably you would think would be shut in and having someone deliver food to her, she's out giving from a place of grace. Change the things you can. Do what you can. Take compassionate action. Accept the things you cannot change. That might be the pearl in the oyster when we talk about equanimity. The ability to accept the things you cannot change. But it's so important that that be paired with change the things you can. Not from anger and hate, remember, from compassion and wisdom. Change the things you can. Accept the things you cannot change. I, Cheryl Fraser, cannot end world hunger on my own. To fight against that, to be sucked into despair, Monique, by that, is when I forget that I cannot change the things I cannot change. I cannot personally end world hunger. I can change the things I can, like donate some money, time, effort, sweat equity, canned goods, perishable goods, fresh produce, to someone who is hungry. Accept the things I cannot change and wisdom to know the difference. So change what you can, accept what you cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. We fall down there. We often rail against the machine. They shouldn't be that way. How is the government, the company, the organization doing that? Well, there is no such thing as a government, a company, or an organization that's anything more than a conglomeration of individuals, some of whom are working in a very wholesome way, some of whom may be more confused or less proficient at what they do, some of whom may hold views that we do not and that we feel are harmful or dangerous. Equanimity is the ability to be with things as they are, but it is not nihilism. It is not giving up. And it doesn't mean, oh, well, that's the way it is. It means, I see the truth of that's how it is. And if the way it is harmful, unwholesome, difficult, or not compassionate, I want to and will, because of compassion, work to change what I can from a place of grace, love, loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, not from a place of rejection, hatred, shame, and fear. This is another big class for another day, a whole class on equanimity. But it's a quality of flexible strength, a quality of accepting the truth of reality. Here we are. There's a global pandemic, and we're choosing and being instructed and being informed by leaders, by medical leaders, by political leaders, by community leaders. Here is what needs to happen to hopefully flatten the curve on virus transmission, to hopefully stop our healthcare system from being overwhelmed the way those in other countries have been, by an upsurge and an exponential increase in infections, where we could end up with hospitals overrun, not enough medical services. And as one person in Italy wrote, about a doctor friend of theirs in Italy, they were literally having to decide in the hallways in Italy who died and who lived. Basically, they'd look at you, and if you're over 65, you didn't get a ventilator in some hospitals because there were so few left, and they were more likely to be able to save the more robust 50-year-old than the less robust 65-year-old. So part of why we're staying home, as you know, if you've been listening, is to prevent that sort of overwhelm of hospitals and equipment and essential services. If there's a slower increase, there's enough beds, there's enough ventilators, there's enough ICUs. It remains to be seen, but here in British Columbia, it's looking cautiously optimistic. Then what we're doing is starting to change things. Equanimity would say, we simply need to accept the truth of COVID-19. There is a virus. We've got a reasonably good idea of how it transmits, and we've got a reasonably good idea of what to do to try to slow the transmissions. And to accept the truth of that reality means we need to be with that reality as it is. Don't waste time wishing it wasn't so. Don't waste time wishing Corona didn't exist. Don't waste time wishing the government, the this, the that, the other things that don't exist, had actually done something differently. Accept the truth of what is happening here, March 30th, 2020, and then make wise, compassionate, personal, professional, constitutional, and community decisions to act in alignment, in community, with compassion. Equanimity means quit fooling yourself. If I could be a little tougher, quit pretending we're all going to live forever. Quit pretending it will all be okay and I don't need to do anything, whether that's coronavirus, whether that's poverty, whether that's your relationship with your friends, whether that's your own health and fitness and losing weight so the diabetes isn't as dangerous. When we fall into, it's the way it is, that's not equanimity, that's foolishness. Equanimity sees the truth of what is. Gee, the way I'm eating and using my body is leading to some medical distress on my system. I really need to be more compassionate to self and those that love me and eat differently and move my body differently so I can be a healthier person. Equanimity accepts what is and has the courage to make the changes that will make the difference. That's a very brief teaching about a very beautiful and complex mind state. But you also all intuitively know, because you've all experienced it, what it's like to be in a state of equanimity, where you're flexible and less reactive, where you accept the unpleasant change without a big drama story, but something happens that's difficult and you sort of roll with it. The old adage of like a willow tree in the wind, it bends and bends and bends, and then it comes back when the wind ceases, whereas a mighty oak can be blown over. Equanimity is this fluidity in the changes of impermanence, of anicca, dukkha, anatta, which we talked about, I think, in the last class. Impermanence, quit taking it personally, non-self, and the truth of some suffering being part of being alive. Equanimity means, for the purposes of tonight, to accept things as they are, so we're freed up from our pre-existing concepts of how they should be. Instead, accept them as they are, so then we can take wise action to meet whatever the circumstances are, when they're positive, when they're neutral, and when they're negative. That's when we can be of great compassion and take good action for the benefit of self and others. Okay. So Monique asks about despair, and saying, if there's a sense of despair, even when we're out, we're connecting, we're working, we're going for walks, we're doing these wise and helpful things, what's the guidance? Is the guidance to just be compassionate until it passes? Sometimes the teachings can feel as though I should be able to sort of snap out of it, get out of my low mood, sadness, or grief, or that those feelings are a problem. Can I speak to that? I certainly can. Thank you for your beautiful and deep question. It's a wee bit of a danger with teachings of Buddha Dharma, teachings of meditation, and even psychotherapy and other personal growth, self-guidance. I quite agree. There can be a sense of just let it go. Just see the truth of reality. Just change your mind state is a very popular phrase. In cognitive behavioral therapy, positive reframe. Look at the difficult situation and make a positive reframe. Now, each and every one of those things I just mentioned are useful techniques, but what they won't necessarily do without a decent amount of training, either a decent amount of depth psychotherapy, a decent amount of rehearsing with various mind techniques, cognitive behavioral, etc., a decent chunk of deep work on Buddha Dharma, including some longer retreats, days, weeks, and even months of training the mind. Until we have a good ballast of working with the physiological body, cortisol, adrenaline, neurohormones, neurochemistry, it's all well and good if one's in the middle of an anxiety or a panic attack, to say, Cheryl, this isn't a disaster. This too shall pass, another lovely phrase that speaks of equanimity. Therefore, calm down. Tell that to the cortisol and adrenaline. Tell that to the neurochemistry. Tell that to the body that's in a state of fear and fight or flight. What am I saying? You can't simply decide to feel better. I wish it were that easy, because you, Monique, and none of us are masochistic twits, and none of us wish to suffer. None of us wish to suffer. So be very gentle with yourself. And one of the instructions I and others would give around what to do if there is the beckoning of despair now or anytime, the beckoning of anxiety now or anytime, the beckoning of heartbreak, of thinking we'll never love again, of loneliness now more than ever, is the teaching of self-compassion. Don't roll your eyes if you're tired of hearing of self-compassion. I'm not talking to you, Monique, so much as other people are like, oh, self-compassion, here we go. Self-compassion has a couple of elements to it. I got to plug in my computer or it's going to die, apparently. So hang on a minute. Will I find, there it is, good. It's nearby. The qualities of self-compassion are, briefly, accepting that this state is present. So let's say I'm feeling a lot of worry and some despair and some hopelessness around the world situation or anything else. Our tendency is to kind of say, Cheryl, smarten up. You're so lucky. You've got friends, you've got pets, you've got a house that you love, you've got beautiful Dharma friends. Kind of smarten up, Cheryl. Well, that's a bit like, beating yourself with a stick when you're already hurting. Self-compassion has the quality of accepting that this is difficult sometimes. And in this moment, there's some difficult physical or emotional states present. There's equanimity, by the way, being with what is. And sometimes what is that the body or mind are suffering. The first noble truth, there will be suffering as part of the human mental, emotional, and physical experience. It's the first noble truth. It's the very first thing the Buddha wants us to realize, the truth of change and the truth of suffering. So of course the body and mind, when we're not awake Buddhas, will at times experience suffering. And because you're good-hearted, beautiful beings who care about the world, who care about others, who want people to be okay, you can be overwhelmed with suffering, with trauma, with torture, with the ugliness and horrors that are part of the world, as well as the beauties, the graces, and the awakenings. So self-compassion says, accept the truth that this is a state that is currently present in this moment. In this moment, anxiety is present. In this moment, despair is beckoning. There is a sense of despair in the being. In this moment, there is sadness and sluggishness. Don't try to force it. Don't try to push it away. And don't indulge it either by kind of curling up in a ball and dwelling and going deeper and deeper into the state. Acknowledge the truth, equanimity, of the experience. There is difficult body or mind sensations in the being. Bring compassion. I too am human. I am not yet an awake Buddha. This is difficult sometimes. And then as best you can, go for a walk or hug your dog or an allowable human to hug if it's the person you're isolating at home with. Because sometimes what we need is to hold a paw or a hand in the midst of the sadness. And we can do that online. We're doing it online right now. We can say to ourselves or to our friend that is suffering, you'd automatically do it to a friend who is suffering, it's okay. Sometimes it's tough. It's okay. Sometimes it all feels like too much. I get you. I see you. Sometimes it's hard. Acknowledge the truth of the present moment experience when the present moment experience is tough. Don't deny it or beat yourself up. That's the non-judgmental part of meditation. Non-judgmental awareness. If I'm feeling a lot of rage and selfishness toward my yucky neighbor who did whatever yucky thing they did, I, in that moment, am experiencing rage and selfishness. So I can then add on self-recrimination and judgment. I'm a terrible Buddhist for feeling rage and selfishness. Or I can say, oh, wow, rage and selfishness are present. This is suffering. This is tough. I too am human. May I bring kind compassion to this difficult state. I do not mean to make it sound easy. In my experience, professionally, personally, as a teacher and a student, it's not easy, but it does help. And you can also check out, I'm going to type it here, Kirsten Neff, whoops, sorry, it's hard to type the way my computer is laid out so you can all see me easily. Kirsten Neff, or Kirsten Neff, N-E-F-F, self-compassion. If you Google that, you'll be taken to, I think it's selfcompassion.org. And she has some beautiful pithy teaching on the 3 pillars of self-compassion, as she has pulled it together. Very nicely done. This idea of accepting the truth of your experience, reminding yourself you too are human, and therefore you're going to sometimes feel difficult things, and bringing present, loving attention, awareness to the direct experience and watching it rise and fall, because everything will pass. Thanks, Neil, for he's put the link up there as well. This too will pass. I don't mean to make this simple. It's not. I've been studying Buddha Dharma, practicing Buddha Dharma for 25 years. I did my first 3-month retreat in the year 2000. That's 20 freaking years ago. It takes depth and breadth and study and patience and impatience and banging your head against the wall. But over time, don't take my word for it, take the Buddha's word for it, or people far wiser than I. Over time, you will experience changes and the ability to be beckoned into despair and to step back from despair more gracefully, like that willow tree moving in equanimity. Okay. So, yes, indeed, the gang is, now I'm all about Kirsten Neff, but yes, she has a book, she has a workbook. Don't worry about it now. That's beautiful. It is on her website, and a very beautiful resource. The beautiful thing is, folks, there are so many phenomenal resources, easily accessible, freely accessible, to help us with these difficult questions at the best of times, and certainly now, which are some of the tougher times for so many of us. So thank you for that deep and beautiful question, Monique. And thank you, Alexis, for the exact wording, because I tend to substitute the words back to forth: the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the tricky part, right? The wisdom to know the difference of where to act and where to accept. Accept does not mean give up. But if the diagnosis is stage 4 virulent cancer, the diagnosis is stage 4 virulent cancer. Accept the diagnosis. Then, from a place of strength and compassion, wisdom, and excellent resources, choose how to work with that diagnosis, including to potentially help that cancer move into remission. But pretending you're fine isn't wise. Accepting the diagnosis, as a friend and a client of mine in the States is doing, stage 4, most virulent type of bone cancer, is what he learned he had about 2 months ago. And now he's doing tremendous, profound, and cutting edge treatment that is seeming to conquer and reverse, not quite reverse, incorrect word medically, but anyway, go with it, the cancer. And he is looking to be almost cancer free. But he didn't pretend he didn't have it. He accepted the truth of the very unpleasant dukkha. And this is a dad of 4 young kids. And it looks like it may be end of lifetime for him. And now it looks like it may well not be. Accept the truth. Then you can make wise, compassionate choices to do the things you can. So the 4 divine abodes, the 4 Brahmaviharas. As I began the beginning of this class, or the beginning of the teaching part of the class, the Dharma Talk part of the class, we can choose where our minds hang out to a small degree. I wish, don't we all, we could simply say, I'm going to only hang out in peacefulness and generosity. And so it is done. That's called spontaneous liberation. Apparently 1 in 100,000 people hear the Dharma and spontaneously liberate. I'm not one of them. I wish we all were. The rest of us have to work away, chip away, fall down and get up, fall down 42 times, get up 43. That is the definition of success. So we train. And I hope you're training. And if not, allow me to get a tiny bit wrathfully compassionate and say, start training right now. You did tonight. Work with meditating, work with training your mind, work with training your attention, work with opening the heart using these practices and others. Go on retreat for a weekend, for a week, for 10 days, for a month, for 3 months, for a year, because nothing else is as important than bringing the mind and heart of compassion to yourself and to all beings and to the world. So we'll start to bring this evening to a close. I want to thank you all for attending. I want to tell you about some upcoming opportunities to share and connect with each other. And then we will close with a brief 3 or 4 minute meditation. And I'll ring the bell 3 times and we'll dedicate the merit. So some of you, I'm recognizing many of the names, are joining for my first big foray into Facebook Live. Those of you who know me know I'm not a huge Facebooker, and yet it was a lovely way to share some teachings of meditation. So with great pleasure, I guess I'm becoming more amenable to Facebook, because this week all morning and last week every morning, Monday through Friday, I'm showing up live on my personal professional Facebook page, Dr. Cheryl Fraser. Neil, I don't know if you're able to throw that link up. Otherwise, it is in the newsletter that Neil so adeptly and kindly and compassionately sends out. So if you just go to Facebook, go to Dr. Cheryl Fraser and like and follow the Facebook page. You can join morning meditations. This week, they're at 9 a.m. Last week, they were at 8 a.m. And many of you on this call, we've got between 25 and 50 people each morning. And the beautiful thing about the Facebook page is you can join live at 9 a.m. Pacific time if you're able. And if not, they stay on the page and you can watch those brief meditations later in the day if you wish. We meditate from about 10 to 25 minutes together. And depending on the morning, I sometimes give a fair bit of teaching on meditation technique. And other mornings, it's a bit more of a moving right into the practice, because you can go back and review some of the other teachings and read about the meditation instructions, both for calming the mind, for focusing the mind, for opening the heart. We're just beginning. There's 42 classical Buddhist meditations, and I'll introduce you to a few of those. Oh, thank you, Brooke. I so appreciate that. It's been really a delight for me to sit with you in the mornings. And Chelsea, yes, the takeaway is to face despair with compassion, but let me tweak that a tiny bit and say, face despair with compassion for self. Because despair is often our worry about the world or our friends or the loved ones, and we forget we're one of our friends and one of our loved ones. So yes, face it with compassion, but compassion for self. Hey, these shoulders are not that big, and I don't know that any of the shoulders watching are that big either to carry the weight of the world, but together we can shoulder the burden bit by bit, one drop in a bucket at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close. So I'll ask everybody to stop in the chat box for a moment while I move into a little bit of a meditation. I'll ring the bell. I'll offer a dedication of merit, and then I will leave the chat box open for a few minutes. I'll leave the screen, but those of you that want to communicate and share emails and make arrangements to chat, which is fantastic. It's a wonderful use of the chat box. I'll leave it open for 5 minutes after I vamoose so that you can continue that, and then I'll close the larger class. How's that sound? So in the mornings, the rest of this week at 9 a.m., please join me live, or you can go there and watch them after for meditations. The next Dharma class, which will be in this Demio platform again, and we'll send out the newsletter, thank you, Neil, so much, with a link to that class, is this coming Saturday, April 4th at 10 a.m. Some of you were registered for and are still hoping to join the online version of the May retreat with Cheryl Donahue, my dear friend and colleague, and myself. Cheryl and I would like to offer that retreat as an online retreat. Those details will be coming. I'm in the process of speaking with Cheryl and speaking to the Hermitage, but we do intend to offer that retreat. I can't give you more information right now, but stay tuned in. About the next week, we'll send out in the email, and the Hermitage may send it out as well, an online version of the Healing, Purification, and Vajrasattva meditation retreat that was scheduled for early mid-May with Cheryl and myself, and many of you may wish to join that retreat. Just stay tuned for details. There's been a few things to put together in the last week or two, and that is next on my agenda list to get to. Okay. So I hope to see some of you in the morning at 9 a.m. Sometimes the dogs join and bark, which is a beautiful arising, right? And we'll sit together for just 2, 3, 4 minutes. Then I'll close. I will exit the screen, but I will leave the chat box open for a few minutes for your beautiful correspondences with each other. So for the moment, closing your eyes and bringing your attention to your direct experience of the body and mind in this moment in the chair right now. Just letting the body be breathing. Directing your attention to the experience of breathing in and out at the heart. Imagining 4 homes that you circulate between. And they've got connecting corridors. One of them is the home of loving kindness, loving friendliness. One of them is the home of compassion for others and for self. One of them is the home of empathetic, friendly joy for others, without self-referencing. And one of them is the home of equanimity, grace, flexibility, acceptance, compassionate action. And train the mind and heart, removing the clouds, dissolving the obstacles, so that the radiance of these 4 divine suns can shine. Inviting your attention to settle on the heart center, experiencing the sensations of just this breath. And offering a dedication of merit. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering of body and mind. May all beings dwell in equanimity, peacefulness, and joy. And may all beings let go of self-referencing and allow the winds of compassionate freedom to blow through their hearts and minds to touch all other beings.